So good evening. One of the last items on the agenda at this year's National Grey Power AGM held in the city over the last 3 days was to elect a new president. The top job went to former Invercargill City Councillor Terry King. Hunter Andrews asked the newly elected Grey Power president what his top priorities are.
Well, from my perspective, one of the key issues is ensuring we have good communication from the National Board down to all the associations throughout New Zealand. And we have 70 associations, about 67,000 odd members. And we need to ensure that we've got a much more effective mechanism for communicating the Board's thoughts. We had a very good turnout of delegates from far away as Kerikeri, Whangarei, and of course a large contingent from Auckland and down through the island and also at the top of the South Island.
Heading into the election, unavoidable, the election's coming up as you mentioned. I guess the encouragement now would be to get people out and actually take part and vote.
Yes, that's a critical issue, but another consideration we have a Grey Power magazine, which is a quarterly production, and we have an election strategy committee, and their function is to highlight key issues and to analyse the manifestos of the main political parties and put that viewpoint into the magazine. And the next publication will be in September, so the timing is pretty close to the election. And that committee is fulfilling a very, very important function for Grey Power.
There are a lot of politicians flowing through here, so they do acknowledge the power of Grey Power and that outreach that these delegates have when they return home and perhaps provide information to members back at home.
Yeah. Grey Power has had a very, very good relationship with all parliamentarians, and we have a regular advocacy trip to Parliament twice a year. And we have appointments with government ministers, with opposition leaders and with certain opposition spokespeople. We've always been well received by all parliamentarians. And I think the main point to emphasise is that Grey Power is an apolitical organisation, and so as a consequence we meet all parties in Parliament. And when we're on the premises meeting government ministers, opposition parties know that we're going to be knocking on their door within the day. And we're treated fairly and reasonably by all parties. There is no distinction.
Is there a difference between issues confronting Southland Grey Power members and Auckland Grey Power members, or issues fairly much the same throughout the country?
The issues are fairly much the same throughout the country, particularly in the areas of superannuation and health and electricity. Of course, the constant price rises of electricity is a major issue with a lot of our members, and that's something we're working to overcome through the formation of Grey Power Electricity.
Tomorrow, a group of 50 Southern cyclists will embark on a day-long 240-kilometre fundraising ride for the Westpac Helicopters annual appeal. Led by Westpac Area Manager Andrew Morton, the group, consisting of Westpac staff, customers, friends and cycling enthusiasts, will ride from Queenstown to Invercargill via Riversdale and Gore. Starting at 6:15, the peloton will be stopping at Garston, Lumsden, Riversdale, Gore Main and Edendale schools along the journey. Mr Morton says the ride is a mental and physical challenge, and considering the various occupations of the riders, it's a bit like a Rotary Club on wheels. This is the 4th year of the fundraising ride, and Mr Morton hopes locals will again get behind the ride and give generously towards the local chopper service. Donations can be made through any branch of the Westpac Bank or through the website chopperappeal.co.nz. This week is Rape Awareness Week, and the theme is healthy sexuality in young people. The nationwide campaign aims to raise awareness about sexual violence in the community as well as fundraising. With around 70% of communication online in chat rooms, social media or by text, the local Rape and Abuse Support Centre is focusing on how this type of communication affects relationships, including identifying warning signs for boundaries and differences.
We talk a lot about that boundaries around communication that each one of us has, the differences between what a healthy relationship looks like on a text messages, what an unhealthy relationship looks like, just a little bit of warning signs to people, like, you know, are you being textually harassed by your mate, your friend, your partner, whoever, you know, like, because it could be a range of people. And also around what you post as well on social media, like those boundaries. Oh, if you post a picture, what would happen to it? So all these things, because later on they come back to you, and then they can affect the way that you relate to someone in terms of into your adulthood, really, because the relationships that young people form in their teenage years, they carry those patterns into adulthood. So that's why it's really important for us to focus on this years. Yeah.
If there are teens out there or parents of teens who have concerns about boundaries and how to set them, what would you recommend?
We always talk about how sitting in front of the TV and talking about what's going on TV is a really healthy way to develop conversations with your children, because you're both watching the same thing, and you can just say, oh, what do you think about that? If you notice as a parent, like if a parent notices, I didn't really like what was going on there, the child sitting next to them watching it, that's a really good opportunity to develop that conversation and basically kind of instill their values into their children's values. Because a lot of the times parents are quite removed from their kids, especially when they are using social media. And even the TV, you know, we just sit there and watch the TV, where we can develop really good conversations around what we're seeing and teach our kids, oh, well, actually, that I didn't think that relationship, what that girl said to that boy was very healthy, or vice versa, you know. So that's really good opportunities to do that.
And as far as people that have been affected or abused online, what's the next step for them?
Well, obviously, that's the hardest thing, because a lot of people that it happens to them online don't actually understand and realise that that's what's happening. They just think, well, this is what happens today, like this is what happens to kids today, and they don't step forward. So, I mean, it might be hard to ask for help and support from mum and dad, because they think they might get into trouble. But there's always, you know, they can come in, they can call us, they can go onto the website, they can talk to their school teacher or their guidance counsellor. So there's a few avenues. And the one thing I want to say is that, you know, if you're sitting out there and thinking, oh, I'm not sure might happen to me, or it makes me feel a bit yucky inside, that's a good enough reason to go and say to someone, oh, I think this is something that's not okay. Because, I mean, it's better to go and seek help and think, and then find out that, okay, maybe it wasn't such a big deal, rather than sitting and stewing over it and then making it worse over time, because you're putting up with a lot more.
You've got a couple of events planned at the end of this week and over the weekend.
Yeah, we do. We have, so because our theme is around young people, so we wanted to target our events as well in terms of fundraising for the young audience. So we're having a benefit gig at Players on Saturday night, and we're having an auction as well at the Kiln on a Friday night. So that's kind of to promote the business sector to come and support us in raising awareness and obviously fundraising.
Landowners in the Waihopai and Waikawa catchments will have better access to funding for fencing and planting following Environment Southland's decision to relax grant criteria. The Living Streams Fund supports landowners in two catchments by awarding grants of up to $100,000 a year to projects that protect or enhance water quality, such as fencing or riparian planting. The grant's considered a significant incentive for landowners wanting to fence off, protect waterways, restore stream banks or create wetlands, projects that would otherwise carry significant costs. ES land sustainability officers will work with landowners who want to access funding and to create riparian management plans and best management practices. Strong client training and support has resulted in extra funding for economic development agency Venture Southland. New Zealand Trade and Enterprise allocated an additional $45,000 to Venture Southland to continue business support services such as training, assistance in research and development projects, business startups and exports. The additional funding is due to demand for the Regional Business Partner Training Program, currently tracking ahead of target with more than $120,000 of funding allocated over 9 months. The extra funding's to meet the current need in Southland and ensure businesses wanting to access training can do so. Stay with us after the break. In the south, to prime locals for votes, it's opposition leader David Cunliffe. Welcome back. Labour leader David Cunliffe was in the city today where he addressed the National Grey Power AGM. Mr Cunliffe told the assembled delegates that yes, Labour would be raising the retirement age to 67, but that would be slowly over a defined period beginning in 2020. He He also stated that his party, unlike the current national government, looked upon people as communities and not commodities. Hunter Andrews started by asking the Labour leader whether the National Cabinet Club was for real or just an opposition beat-up in election year.
Sadly, it's for real, but it's not right, and New Zealanders won't put up with it. To have a so-called cabinet club where people pay up to $10,000 a year to get a minimum of 3 close contact opportunities with ministers is, in our view, outside the Cabinet Manual rulebook and beyond New Zealanders' tolerance. This is not right.
This is not something that's going to bite Labour on the bum. There aren't going to be people coming forward saying, well, under the Helen Clark administration, these sorts of things went on.
No, we've never run a scheme called a cabinet club for ministers. And ministers are different from other MPs. They have warrants of the state. They make big decisions, and they should not be in the position where access to them is sold in that way. Of course, all political parties do fundraisers, whether that's a wine auction or a dinner or something like that, and of course all sorts of people come to those. But that is a quite distinct and different situation from a subscriber-based guaranteed access scheme to ministers of the Crown.
How important for Labour will the pursuit of this issue be in the coming weeks?
Well, I think it's part of a series, and I think New Zealanders can now join the dots. They know that politics, as usual, under this national government is all about them chasing money for themselves, and it's not right. We want politics for the people again. We want to put people first. That's what we're going to be about.
You mentioned in the meeting just before communities, not commodities.
Yeah, because look, if you've got a heart for people, then they have to be treated with dignity and respect and kindness throughout all aspects of a government's work. And they're not just numbers, they're not about money, they're about real human needs and having the opportunities to make the best life that they can be, each and every one of them. And our heart is in this for 100% of New Zealanders, not just 1%. And that's what this government's now got a reputation for being, a government for the top 1%, whether that's the biggest corporates like SkyCity, Warner Brothers, Rio Tinto, or whether it is for those wealthy individuals that seem to be able to buy their way into access and special favours. All of that is wrong. We want our country back.
I asked Winston Peters yesterday, I'll ask the Prime Minister tomorrow, I'll ask you now, what's in it for Southland, a vote for Labour, for Southlanders? It's very Auckland-centric at the moment. There's problems up there and Christchurch, but what for the regions?
Well, for a start, the stuff we announced last week, lower mortgages. Southlanders, where house prices are declining, shouldn't be paying for Auckland's property bubble. And under National you are, because they have a one-size-fits-all monetary policy where every time the Auckland property market gets hot, the Reserve Bank jacks up interest rate and Southlanders pay the price. That's ridiculous. So that's why we've introduced policy which will change the objectives of the Reserve Bank, still control inflation, but give them some new tools like compulsory KiwiSaver and a variable savings rate, which will allow them to do that with lower mortgages and rents. And that's important to every household.
We're talking a bit over the noise going on in the background, but let's talk about Invercargill, Leslie Soper.
Sure.
How much of a priority is this seat?
It's a high priority for us. Leslie's a very experienced and well-known candidate. She's going to bring the seat home for Labour. Eric Roy is retiring. The newbie doesn't sound like too much, to be honest. And Leslie has every chance of winning this seat and helping to bring to the people of Invercargill the fresh opportunities that they deserve. Can I also mention in Clutha Southland, Dr. Liz Craig. If there was ever a contrast between National, who's got a tobacco company executive, standing against a paediatrician, that has got to be speaking volumes for the different ethos of our two parties.
Eric Roy, though, a 6,200 and something majority, a change of boundaries in 2008, I believe, that put it more into national voters. You're taking seriously Invercargill?
Well, look, it's the party vote in every seat that changes the government. So our first message to all New Zealanders is party vote Labour gives you a new start and a fresh government that cares about you. But it's also important that we hold seats in the provinces particularly, because the interests of provincial New Zealanders are best represented through active local MPs who have bases and can serve their community right here in Invercargill. And we can do that a lot better if Leslie Soper is the MP for Invercargill. I'm not going to knock Eric Roy, I've known him for years, and he's one of Parliament's gentlemen, all right? That's the truth of it. But Eric is retiring, and Leslie has now got her time to shine. This is Leslie's time. She'll be a wonderful MP for Invercargill, I can tell you that.
And would we what sort of place on the list? You talk about the list vote or the party vote. What sort of place on the list for her? Because
look, I don't know the answer to that, and frankly, that's not up to me. That's up to the party and the party moderating committee, which will occur in June, and you'll know after that.
you'd see it as a good thing, though, if National prevailed here, to have Leslie here, though.
Sure, it would be a great thing to have a candidate in this region, but I have a rule that I never comment in advance on the deliberations of the moderating committee. That is a very important democratic process of our party, and is not for the leader to try and set direction through the media.
Tonight on Sport, thanks to our friends at the Herald, the first in a 3-part interview with former All Black captain Stu Wilson, with part 2 screening tomorrow night. From the news team, good night.